Joining us is Congressman Bernie Sanders, who is an independent from the state of Vermont. He is with the Progressive Caucus in organizing what he is calling Cancel the Contract. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, thank you. What do you mean by that?
Well, basically what we mean is that the contract is a fraud. We think that the more the American people understand what is in the contract, which essentially amounts to very large tax breaks for the wealthiest people in this country, the eventual destruction of Social Security, major slashes in Medicare and Medicaid, increasing military spending, and cutting back on nutrition programs for hungry children and for needy senior citizens. I think as people understand what is in the contract, I think they will begin to reject it. So our job is not only to oppose the contract, but also to come up with sensible solutions, rational solutions that work well for ordinary Americans, for working Americans, and not just for the wealthy and the powerful.
Give us one example.
Well, I'll give you one example. At a time when the Cold War is over, when a time we are already spending too much money on the military, at a time when people are concerned about a $200 billion deficit, it seems to us to be basically insane to be significantly expanding the military, as the Republicans propose to do, at a time when we should be making substantial cutbacks and we should be taking a hard look at the intelligence budget and the CIA as well. You don't throw hungry children off of school lunch programs, off of the WIC program, off of the food stamp program, in my view, in order to expand the Star Wars program.
Ariana Huffington.
Well, first of all, I'm really relieved that the Democrats are finally speaking their minds, because at the beginning, after November 8th, there was this period when the president started to sound like a Republican, when Dick Gephardt tried to sound like a Republican, and now finally at least we're hearing what they really believe. I consider this rhetoric the rhetoric of fear about hungry children being thrown off programs. What about looking at all the damage that has been done so far? What about looking at how poverty has been unchanged after spending $5 trillion on welfare? And what about considering alternatives?
That's right. And I think we should. One of the things that we want to do, you're quite right, we want to look at alternatives. And we think that anybody who could simply say, let's throw people off of welfare without understanding that there needs to be jobs out there, that in the United States of America, our infrastructure is crumbling. Our educational system is crumbling. To say to people, you're off of welfare, and 70% of the people receiving AFDC are children, without making sure that there are jobs for people is wrong. That is why, among other things, we are proposing to raise the minimum wage so that people can earn a living wage, and second of all, propose a jobs program to rebuild America, to put people to work, so there is something for people who are on welfare to look forward to.
Congressman Sanders, one of the elements of Contract with America says that welfare would remain, but after 2 years, you're off. Does that seem reasonable?
I think if you're saying is that it is wrong to provide welfare to somebody when there is a job out there and that person says, no, I'm too good, I don't want to work, nobody thinks that's appropriate. On the other hand, if you say to a mother with 2 kids, well, you have to get off of welfare, even though there is no job, there is no transportation to get to the job, there is no child care to take care of that child, then that is basically cruel and silly. So I think anyone who is serious about talking about welfare reform must talk about jobs. And that is certainly what the Progressive Caucus is talking about.
The first element is balancing the federal budget. Should it be balanced, and if so, when?
I think that it is absolutely appropriate that we move toward a balanced budget. A $4 trillion debt, $200 billion deficit is a serious problem. I would argue that it is hypocritical of the Republicans to be talking about moving toward a balanced budget when at the same time they want to give tax breaks to the wealthy, when they want to expand military spending, which is precisely how we ran up a $3 trillion debt during the 1980s. Second of all, if you're talking about moving toward a balanced budget and not raising taxes on upper income people, keeping the corporate tax lower than it was 20 or 30 years ago, the inevitable conclusion, and the Republicans, honest Republicans, are admitting it, is that you're going to have to destroy the Social Security system. You're going to have to make huge cutbacks in Medicare for the elderly. You're going to have to slash veterans programs. And despite what Mrs. Huffington said, it is not alarmist. We're not trying to frighten people to say that they are going to slash nutrition programs for children. That's what the food stamp program is. That's what the WIC program is. That is what they intend to do. Tax breaks for the rich, cutting back on hungry programs for hungry children is not what I believe America is supposed to be.
You know, I think while they may come from different political sides of the political spectrum, Congressman Sanders and our recent caller from Sequim, Washington, were saying roughly, had sort of the same directive, which is do it. Let's see concretely what you're going to do. And so I hear the congressman say, for example, we ought to be taking the same hard look at our military spending and our intelligence spending that we would take at any other aspect of the federal budget. Do we really need to make these kinds of investments? We ought to be looking at what works and what would be concrete. And if we are talking about moving to a balanced budget, we ought to be saying what kinds of government spending are we prepared to cut back? That's why, as I say, I thought it was very interesting to see, after some of the rhetoric about the contract with America, in every newspaper today there is a story about how the deadlines are slipping, that first $200 billion in tax cuts, which people were talking about identifying, are hard to find. I think that is the reality that we're looking at right now, which is these are tough decisions. And the American people are saying to the people they elected to office, what are you going to do about it? Speeches are over. The campaign is over. It's time for action. That is the test that Speaker Gingrich and his new Republican majority will have to pass.
Congressman Sanders will be in the House gallery later this morning talking about what they're calling cancel the contract. He is with the Progressive Caucus. Who makes up this caucus?
Well, we have about 34 members from all over the country. People who see their main job here is not representing big money interest, but representing working people and elderly people and the people who are not getting a fair shake from government.
I would say that they clearly are people who have not looked at what has happened in the last 30 years. It seems to me amazing to hear you use all the same rhetoric, all the same language, and the same belief in big government solutions. Big government, from what you said, is supposed to provide the jobs, is supposed to provide the benefits, is supposed to take care of everybody. It hasn't worked.
Well,
you know what is the definition of insanity? To keep doing the same thing again and again, expecting different results, and it seems to me that's what the Progressive Caucus is all about.
Well, I think you may not know what the Progressive Caucus is trying to do, because on issue after issue, we are presenting concrete alternatives. When you talk about insanity, it seems to me to be taking food away from hungry children in order to give tax breaks to the wealthy. That's insanity. When you talk about a citizen legislature, and that's some of the jargon in the Republican contract with America, but continue to have a campaign finance system by which millionaires can spend $25 or $30 million to buy a Senate seat, I think that's insanity. I think if you're going to talk about a citizen legislature, we need campaign finance reform so that we can end the control of Congress on the part of millionaires and very wealthy people, and maybe have some people here in Washington who are prepared to fight for working people and not just the wealthy.
Congressman Bernie Sanders, independent from the state of Vermont, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.